All right, strap in, everyone, because we're diving headfirst into some seriously creepy stuff today. Project MKUltra, the CIA's mind control program, that whole thing. And you sent us some really fascinating stuff for this deep dive, including some YouTube deep dives. And honestly, the reality is just way, way stranger than fiction.
It really is. And it's crazy how this all played out during the Cold War when, America was obsessed with um, beating the Soviets well, everything. And they really thought mind control was like the ultimate weapon.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to just like control someone's thoughts,
Yeah.
actions, the implications are, well, they're pretty terrifying.
So we're talking hallucinogenic drugs, unsuspecting citizens. I even saw something about a magician teaching agents how to spike drinks. I mean, where do we even start with all this?
It kind of all starts with the Cold War. After Korea, right, American officials were totally convinced that the Soviets had cracked the mind control code, basically, because American POWs were coming home, seemingly brainwashed with communist ideologies, which really freaked them out.
So the CIA basically thought, well, if they can do it, we have to do it better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were totally convinced they were falling behind in like this mind control arms race, which is kind of a wild concept when you think about it.
Mhm.
And they ended up pouring like $25 million into researching ways to control human behavior. And all of it, top secret.
Wait, $25 million back in the 50s. That's an insane amount of money. Shows you how seriously they were taking this.
Oh, absolutely. This was like peak Cold War paranoia. The fear of communism was, well, it was everywhere. And they truly believed mind control, held the key to winning the war, basically dominating the world.
So this wasn't just one project, right? Culture was way bigger than that.
Oh, yeah. And culture was like this massive umbrella with over 150 sub-projects underneath.
Yeah.
These experiments were happening all over, at universities, research centers, even prisons.
It's just crazy to think about, being a prisoner. Maybe they're offered a reduced sentence to participate in some, study, and they end up a guinea pig in some, messed up experiment. Chilling.
Yeah, and so many of these experiments went way, way beyond any, ethical boundaries. A big part of this whole thing was this guy, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. He was like the mad scientist running MKUltra, I guess you could say.
Wasn't he the one obsessed with LSD? I read something about him trying to buy, the entire world's supply of LSD from a company in Switzerland.
He did. Offered them like $250,000, which is, way more than $2 million in today's money, for 10 kilograms of LSD.
Yeah.
But you know what they got? 10 grams.
He paid millions for, a tiny vial. What a scam.
Yeah, it was a huge embarrassment for, Gottlieb and the CIA, but it really shows how desperate they were to get their hands on this drug. They thought LSD held, the key to unlocking the secrets of the mind, maybe even like reprogramming someone's thoughts and behaviors.
And from what I've read, Gottlieb wasn't exactly known for ethical boundaries, right? He was willing to experiment on basically anyone.
Yeah, he was known for doing all these crazy experiments on animals. His lab was often just like full of dead monkeys, really horrified his colleagues. And his disregard for ethics, it extended to his own employees too. Have you heard about that infamous dinner party he threw?
Oh, the LSD-laced dinner party? I've got to hear about this.
So Gottlieb throws this weekend retreat at his mansion for his whole staff, right? It's supposed to be this chill thing, good food, hanging out. But during dinner, things start getting weird. His employees start feeling off, colors are brighter, sounds are distorted, like reality itself is just like warping around them.
Sounds like a recipe for a bad trip.
It totally was.
Yeah.
And eventually, Gottlieb admits that he spiked their drinks with LSD, wanted to see if it would make them more likely to like reveal secrets, to be manipulated.
Seriously, imagine being drugged by your own boss without your knowledge or consent. I mean, what a betrayal.
And the consequences were, devastating. One of his employees, Frank Olson, had a really bad reaction.
That's where this whole story takes a really dark turn.
Yeah, so Olson was this brilliant scientist, had a family, but after that night, he was never the same. Just spiraled into like a deep depression. He was super paranoid, anxious all the time, told his colleagues he felt confused, forgetful, like he was losing himself.
And eventually, Olson told Gottlieb he was thinking about resigning. Do you think Gottlieb saw that as a threat?
It's possible, right? Because Gottlieb suggests that Olson go see this psychiatrist in New York City. Olson agrees, desperate for help at this point, and travels to New York with a CIA colleague, this guy, Robert Lashbrook. They check into a hotel. And that night, well, tragedy strikes.
Olson supposedly jumped from his hotel window as suicide. But the circumstances around his death are super suspicious, right?
Totally. The initial story was that, Olson was overwhelmed, took his own life. But get this, 22 years later, an investigation by the Washington Post, they found some serious doubts about that whole story. Olson's family was convinced there was more to it. They sued the CIA, ended up getting a $750,000 settlement.
Sounds like someone wanted to make them be quiet, but obviously they still wanted the truth. What happened when they confronted Gottlieb?
They actually met with him years after Olson died. And the first thing Gottlieb says to them is, "I'm so happy you don't have a weapon. I had a dream last night that you all arrived at this door and shot me."
Wow, talk about feeling guilty.
Right. And Olson's son later said he felt like manipulated by Gottlieb, like the whole meeting was a performance to try and, get sympathy and avoid taking responsibility. Gottlieb never admitted to doing anything wrong, but he did say something kind of cryptic. He said, "Your father and I were very much alike. We both got into this because of patriotic feeling, but we both went a little too far, and we did things that we probably shouldn't have done."
That's about as close to a confession as you're going to get, I guess. But Olson's son wasn't satisfied. He wanted the truth. So he had his father's body exhumed and had another autopsy done. What did they find?
Well, the new autopsy showed some pretty big differences from the original one. Like, there were no glass shards on Olson's body, which you'd expect if he'd jumped through a window, right? And even more telling, they found a big injury above his left eye, an injury that wasn't in the original report at all. The pathologist said this injury probably happened before the fall, meaning someone probably hit Olson with something.
So someone attacked him before he went out the window. This was murder, not suicide, and the CIA covered it up.
The evidence definitely points to that, leaving out that crucial detail from the original report and all the inconsistencies in the official story. It all just screams cover-up.
It's like something out of a spy movie. But Frank Olson wasn't the only one subjected to MKUltra experiments, and not everyone was like an unwitting participant, right?
No, you're right. While a lot of these experiments targeted unsuspecting people, like people just grabbed off the street, prisoners hoping for shorter sentences, even people seeking mental health treatment, there were some people who actually volunteered for what they thought were, legitimate studies. They had no clue they were signing up to be part of some top-secret CIA program.
And one of those volunteers was James Whitey Bulger, who later became one of Boston's most notorious mob bosses. His story is kind of crazy because it links MKUltra to organized crime.
Yeah, exactly. So Bulger was doing time in Atlanta Penitentiary back in the 50s, and he agreed to be in what he thought was a study on schizophrenia. Turned out to be part of MKUltra.
What did they do to him?
Well, for a whole year, Bulger and some other inmates were given LSD every single day. Imagine being trapped in a, psychedelic nightmare for a year.
It's hard to even imagine the psychological damage that must have caused. What kind of impact did it have on him?
Well, Bulger described it as a living nightmare. Said it drove him to the edge of insanity. He started getting super paranoid, hearing voices, felt completely disconnected from reality. He even had this delusion that he would be killed if he ever talked about the experiment.
So he just suffered in silence, enduring a year of, psychological torture, and when he was released.
Well, he went on to become one of the most ruthless mob bosses in Boston history. Ruled his criminal empire with, violence, intimidation, tons of victims.
It's chilling to think that the CIA's experiments might have actually contributed to his, reign of terror.
It's definitely a disturbing possibility. Bulger himself actually said that the MKUltra experiments, they changed him, made him more paranoid, more violent, way more ruthless.
It's like a real-life horror story, The government tries to control minds, and it backfires, creating a monster.
It's a warning, that's for sure. Even the most, well-intentioned experiments can have totally unintended and devastating consequences.
So far in this deep dive, we've gone over the origins of MKUltra. The CIA's obsession with controlling minds, the crazy, unethical experiments they did, the lives they ruined, and, how all of this has shaped how we think about government power and our own rights. But we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, for sure. MKUltra was huge, super complex, and its influence reached into some really unexpected places. One of the most disturbing parts of this whole thing involves a guy named Dr. Ewan Cameron and his work at the Allen Memorial Institute up in Montreal.
From what I've read, Cameron's work takes MKUltra to a whole other level of messed up.
He was this Scottish-American psychiatrist who thought he'd found the secret to curing mental illness. He called it depatterning.
Depatterning. What's that?
His theory was that you had to totally dismantle a person's mind, like wipe the slate clean, and then rebuild it from scratch, free from any negative thoughts or behavior.
That sounds terrifying.
It was. Cameron used a bunch of extreme methods to do this. Huge doses of LSD, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation tanks, drug-induced comas that lasted for weeks, and something called psychic driving.
Hold on, psychic driving? What is that? Some kind of sci-fi thing?
It sounds like it, right? But for Cameron's patients, this was all too real. Psychic driving was basically recording a patient's deepest fears and insecurities and then playing them back, like on a loop, for hours, sometimes even weeks. Imagine having your worst nightmares just blasted at you day and night.
That's just torture.
Yeah, it was. And Cameron did this to his patients in the name of science. And he was getting funding from the CIA, who saw his work as a potential breakthrough for, mind control.
So these weren't criminals or like enemy agents. These were everyday people, often struggling with, normal mental health issues. They went to Cameron for help, and he basically turned them into test subjects for his messed up experiments.
Exactly. And one of the most heartbreaking cases is this woman, Esther Schreier. She was a young mother dealing with postpartum depression, and she was admitted to the Allen Memorial Institute. Cameron immediately put her into a drug-induced coma that lasted for 30 days.
30 days? That's over a month.
Yeah, and during that time, he also gave her 29 electroshock treatments. And get this, she was pregnant this whole time.
Wait, she was pregnant during all of that? That's just inhumane.
It is. And when Schreier finally woke up, she was just a shell of her former self. She was incontinent, couldn't speak, had trouble swallowing, and her memories were all fragmented. She was completely broken.
What happened to her baby?
She gave birth to a healthy son, but she was in no shape to take care of him because of her condition. So he was put into foster care. Her son, Lloyd, is still alive today and is fighting for recognition as an MKUltra victim.
And that's just one story. How many other lives were ruined by Cameron's experiments?
Countless. A lot of his patients were released from the Allen Memorial Institute way worse off than when they went in. They couldn't hold down jobs, care for their families, and some were permanently disabled.
And the CIA was okay with all of this. It's hard to believe it went on for so long.
It did. MKUltra operated in the shadows for 20 years, all fueled by that Cold War paranoia and this relentless desire to achieve mind control. But how did it all finally end?
Yeah, how did such a huge program finally come crashing down?
Well, in 1973, President Nixon fired Richard Helms, the director of the CIA. He thought Helms was disloyal, and Helms was worried that MKUltra and all its horrors would be exposed, so he ordered Sidney Gottlieb to destroy all the records.
So they tried to erase any evidence of what they'd done.
They did, and they were mostly successful, but some documents survived, thanks to a whistleblower named John Marks. He wrote a book called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, which exposed a lot of what had been going on.
So that's how the world found out about MKUltra.
Yeah. Congress held hearings in the 70s, and the CIA had to admit that the program existed. But they played dumb, downplayed how big it was, and claimed they'd shut it down.
But did they really shut it down? Or did it just morph into something else, something even more secret?
That's a question that still haunts us today. It definitely is a dark chapter, And the thing is, the CIA wasn't the only organization poking around in mind control during the Cold War.
Really? Who else was involved?
Well, there's evidence that, the Soviets were running their own experiments. And even in the U.S., the Army had a program called Project Chatter, where they were focused on finding and testing truth serums for, interrogations.
So this whole thing about cracking the human mind, using it as a weapon, it wasn't just an American thing.
No, not at all. The Cold War created this atmosphere of, total paranoia. Nobody trusted anybody. Governments were willing to do just about anything to, get an advantage over their enemies. And the idea of controlling someone's thoughts, their actions, their whole being, it was just, too tempting to resist.
It's like something out of a dystopian novel, right? And it's even more disturbing that a lot of these, unethical experiments weren't happening in some secret underground bunker. They were happening out in the open. Universities, hospitals, even prisons.
That's right. And that's one of the most unsettling things about MKUltra. It wasn't just confined to, the shadowy parts of the intelligence community. It was happening in mainstream institutions, blurring the lines between, legitimate research and really dangerous experimentation.
And the people involved, these scientists, doctors, researchers, they weren't all, inherently evil, right? I mean, some of them must have started with good intentions.
That's a tough question. I think some of them were genuinely interested in understanding the human mind, finding new ways to treat mental illness. But somewhere along the way, they got caught up in this web of secrecy and ambition, and they started compromising their ethics. They told themselves they were doing it for the greater good,
Yeah.
protecting national security, fighting communism, that kind of thing.
I get the whole good intentions argument, but it's hard to square that with the methods they use, the total disregard for human suffering. How can we make sense of that?
It's a slippery slope, right? When you start justifying unethical behavior in the name of national security, where do you draw the line? And with MKUltra, that line was definitely crossed.
But the program was exposed, shut down, condemned.
Right. Officially, yes. But the truth is, we may never really know the full extent of MKUltra. How many victims there were, the long-term consequences of these experiments, or whether similar programs are still going on today, just hidden even deeper.
That's the most unsettling part of it all. It's a reminder of, the dark side of human nature, how governments can abuse their power, and just how vulnerable our own minds are.
It forces us to think about some important questions, like the ethics of scientific research, the importance of informed consent, the need for transparency and accountability in our intelligence agencies. These are all things that are still relevant today, especially with all the surveillance and data collection going on.
It's a reminder that we can't just blindly trust authority. We have to think critically, question what we're told, and hold our leaders accountable for what they do.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the victims of MKUltra, the people whose lives were completely changed by these experiments. They deserve justice, recognition, and our support. Their stories need to be told. Their voices need to be heard. We have to learn from the mistakes of the past so we can make sure something like MKUltra never happens again.
You mentioned earlier that the CIA wasn't the only one looking into mind control. Were there any other, notable projects or programs during that time?
Well, besides what the Soviets were doing, which is still pretty much a mystery, there was this lesser-known U.S. Army project called Project Chatter. It started in the early 50s, and their main focus was finding and testing truth serums to use in interrogations.
So instead of trying to, control minds, they were trying to get information out of them?
Exactly. The idea behind Project Chatter was that there were certain chemicals that could break down a person's resistance and make them spill secrets. They experimented with all kinds of drugs like mescaline, scopolamine, hoping to find a truth serum that actually worked.
Did they have any luck?
Well, they did have some limited success, getting people into a more suggestible state, but they never really found a truth serum that was reliable and got accurate information. In fact, a lot of times the results were all over the place. People would hallucinate, become delusional, or even give false confessions.
So Project Chatter, kind of like MKUltra, was a failure.
From a scientific perspective, yeah. But ethically, it raises some serious concerns about what lengths governments will go to get information. Using drugs to force confessions or get intel, it goes against basic human rights and undermines justice.
It's disturbing that this was happening in our own country. Makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden away in those government research files.
The truth is, we may never know everything about these secret programs. But it's important to keep asking questions, keep investigating, and keep holding those in power accountable.
And we can't forget about the victims, the people whose lives were changed forever by these experiments. They deserve justice, recognition, and our support.
Absolutely. Their stories remind us how important it is to protect individual rights and freedoms, and how important it is to be vigilant against abuses of power.
With all the darkness surrounding MKUltra, there's this strange connection to something more, well, colorful.
Colorful. How do you...
I'm talking about those LSD parties the CIA was throwing, the acid tests.
Ah, right.
Huh.
Totally unethical. But those gatherings actually played a part in shaping the counterculture movement of the 60s. The people who went to those parties, a lot of artists, musicians, writers, they were exposed to LSD and other psychedelics. And it had a huge impact on their creativity and how they saw the world.
So the CIA, trying to control minds, accidentally helped start a cultural revolution.
It's pretty ironic, right? But it's true. Those psychedelic experiences influenced the music, art, and literature of the time. It led to a shift in consciousness, people started questioning authority more, and there was this celebration of individual freedom.
It's fascinating that the CIA's experiments, which were meant for control and manipulation, might have unintentionally helped a movement focused on self-discovery and liberation.
It shows just how unpredictable human experience is, and the power of unintended consequences. But we shouldn't romanticize these substances or downplay the risks either.
Of course. LSD and psychedelics, they have shown some promise for treating certain mental health conditions, but they can also be really dangerous if they're used recklessly or without proper supervision.
Exactly. We need to be cautious and respectful with these substances, recognizing both their potential benefits and the risks.
Speaking of unintended consequences, there's another part of MKUltra that's just, well, almost too strange to believe. Have you heard of Operation Midnight Climax?
The name rings a bell. Sounds like something out of a spy movie, that's for sure.
It does, doesn't it? Okay, picture this. The CIA sets up a safe house in San Francisco, disguised as a brothel. They hire prostitutes to lure men back there with the promise of, a good time.
Okay, it already sounds pretty wild.
Yeah.
So where does the mind control part come in?
Well, the men had no idea, but CIA agents were secretly dosing their drinks with LSD.
So they were using sex and drugs to manipulate people. Yeah, it does sound like a bad spy movie.
It was, and get this, it gets even weirder. The CIA actually brought in a professional magician to teach their agents how to spike drinks without getting caught.
A magician? Seriously?
They were serious about making this operation run smoothly, so they found an expert in, sleight of hand and misdirection, to make sure their agents could slip LSD into drinks without anyone noticing.
That's ridiculous and kind of brilliant at the same time. I mean,
No.
if you're going to dose someone without them knowing, might as well do it with style, I guess.
It definitely adds to the absurdity of the whole thing, but it also shows just how obsessed they were with control and secrecy. They weren't content with just drugging people. They wanted to do it in a way that was completely undetectable.
Classic MKUltra, right? Manipulate and control, leave no trace. Makes you wonder what other tricks they might have learned from the world of magic.
That's a question that might never be answered. Most of the MKUltra records were destroyed, so we'll probably never know the full extent of their relationship with magicians. But some people think magicians played a much bigger part in the program than we realize.
Interesting. How so?
Well, think about what magicians do. They manipulate perception, they create illusions, they can even implant false memories, they make people believe things that aren't true. Those are all skills that would be super useful for an intelligence agency obsessed with mind control.
That's true. If you could actually control someone's mind without them knowing, like with magic, that would be the ultimate weapon.
Exactly. And some people even think the CIA wasn't just learning from magicians. They were trying to recruit them, turn them into assets for their mind control operations.
That sounds a little far-fetched, even for MKUltra. Is there any evidence of that?
It's mostly speculation, but there are some interesting connections between the CIA and some famous magicians. Like John Mulholland, a well-known magician, he was a consultant for the CIA in the 50s.
A magician working for the CIA, what kind of consulting did he do?
The details are still classified, but some people think he advised them on interrogation techniques, psychological manipulation, even stagecraft for their secret missions.
So it wasn't just a one-way street. The CIA was actively seeking out expertise from the world of magic.
There are even rumors that the CIA tried to recruit Harry Houdini.
Harry Houdini, the escapologist. Why would the CIA want him?
While Houdini was a master of deception, illusion, and psychological manipulation, he could escape from anything, control people's attention, make them believe the unbelievable.
I can see why they'd be interested in him. But did Houdini actually work with them?
That's where things get fuzzy. There's no official proof that Houdini ever worked with the CIA, but the rumors are out there.
It's an intriguing thought. Just adds another layer of mystery to the whole MKUltra story. Makes you wonder what other secrets are buried in those CIA files, what other weird connections are waiting to be found.
The world of espionage is full of secrets and deception, isn't it? Reality and illusion get all mixed up, and the truth is hard to find. MKUltra, with its magicians and mind control experiments, it just embodies all of that.
It reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge and power can lead us down some pretty dark paths. And the lines between science, magic, and espionage, they can get dangerously blurred.
There's one more part of MKUltra we need to talk about. It connects this whole shadowy program to organized crime. It involves a guy you might have heard of, Whitey Bulger.
Whitey Bulger, the Boston mob boss. What does he have to do with MKUltra?
It's a story that really shows the unintended consequences of these experiments, how they could create monsters instead of controlling them. Bulger's involvement with MKUltra adds another layer of complexity and darkness to this already messed up story.
I'm definitely interested. Tell me more.
So Bulger, as you know, was a notorious gangster. He ruled the Boston underworld for decades, involved in racketeering, drug trafficking, lots of murders. But what makes his story relevant to MKUltra is that he was actually a test subject in their experiments while he was in prison.
Wait, the CIA was experimenting on a mob boss?
Seems that way. Bolger was in Atlanta Penitentiary in the 50s, and he was recruited for what he thought was a study on schizophrenia. They offered him a reduced sentence if he participated.
So they used a lighter sentence to get him to be a guinea pig.
Exactly. He had no idea he was signing up for something way more sinister. The study was actually part of MKUltra, and Bolger was given repeated doses of LSD and other mind-altering drugs.
It's hard to believe they thought experimenting on a hardened criminal was a good idea.
Their motives are still a mystery. Some people think they were trying to find ways to turn criminals into assassins or informants. Others think they were just curious about how LSD would affect a psychopath.
Whatever they were trying to do, it's clear they were messing with something dangerous. What happened to Bolger after he got out of prison?
Well, he became one of the most powerful and feared mob bosses in Boston history, ruled his criminal empire with violence and intimidation, left a lot of victims in his wake.
It's terrifying to think that the CIA's experiments might have actually helped him become that monster.
It's a disturbing thought. Bolger himself said that the MKUltra experiments changed him, made him more paranoid, violent, and ruthless.
It's like a real-life horror movie. The government tries to control minds, and they end up unleashing a monster.
It's a cautionary tale, that's for sure. Even with the best intentions, experiments can have consequences that are completely unexpected and really destructive.
The story of Whitey Bulger and MKUltra shows how complicated things can get when you mix individual psychology, government experiments, and just the unpredictable nature of human behavior. It's a reminder that trying to control or manipulate the human mind can have unforeseen and often tragic consequences.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive into MKUltra. We've gone over the program's origins, the CIA's obsession with mind control, the unethical experiments, the lives that were ruined, and how all of this has changed how we understand government power, individual rights, and even what it means to be human.
It's been a fascinating journey, even though it's been a disturbing one. And even though we've uncovered some shocking truths, there's one more twist to this story that might surprise you.
Oh, what is it?
We're going to explore the strange connection between MKUltra and the world of magicians.
Magicians. That's not what I was expecting. How do they fit into all of this?
Get ready for some mind-bending revelations. In Part 3, we'll see how the CIA's quest for mind control led them to the doorsteps of some of the most famous illusionists of the 20th century.
All right, lay it on me. Magicians and MKUltra, how does that even work?
Well, remember we talked about Operation Midnight Climax, that crazy CIA scheme where they used LSD and prostitutes for, mind control?
Oh, yeah. Hard to forget that one.
Well, the CIA was so obsessed with making that whole operation, super smooth, they actually brought in a professional magician to train their agents.
Wait, are you serious? They hired a magician to teach their agents how to secretly spike drinks with LSD?
Exactly. They wanted their agents to be like masters of sleight of hand, misdirection, all those classic magician tricks. The magician even showed them how to spike a drink so it looked totally innocent.
That's both hilarious and kind of brilliant. Like, if you're going to dose someone without them knowing, might as well do it with a little flair.
Right. Adds insult to injury. But it really shows how obsessed they were with secrecy and, being in control. They weren't happy with just drugging people. They wanted to do it so perfectly that no one would ever suspect a thing.
Classic MKUltra, right? Manipulate and control and don't leave a trace. Makes you wonder what other tricks they might have learned from magicians.
It's a good question, but we might never know the answer. They destroyed most of the MKUltra records, so the full extent of their collaboration with magicians is probably lost forever. But some people think magicians were a much bigger part of the program than we realize.
Really? How so?
Think about what magicians do. They're experts at, messing with your perception, creating illusions. They can even, plant false memories in your mind, make you believe things that aren't real. Those are all skills that would be super valuable to an intelligence agency, one that's focused on mind control.
That's a good point. If you could actually harness the power of magic, influence someone's mind without them even knowing, that would be like the ultimate form of control.
Exactly. And some people even think that the CIA wasn't just learning from magicians, they were actively trying to recruit them to become assets for their mind control operations.
Okay, now that sounds a little out there, even for MKUltra. Is there any actual evidence of that?
It's mostly just speculation at this point. But there are some interesting connections between the CIA and some big-name magicians from back then. There was this guy, John Mulholland, a pretty well-known magician, who actually worked as a consultant for the CIA in the 50s.
Seriously? A magician working for the CIA? What did he even do for them?
The specifics are still classified, But some people think he advised them on, like, interrogation techniques, psychological manipulation, maybe even, stagecraft for their covert
But
operations.
the CIA was actually employing magicians, not just learning from them passively.
It seems that way. And there are even rumors that they tried to recruit Harry Houdini.
Harry Houdini, the escapologist, why would the CIA want him?
Well, Houdini was like a master of deception, illusion, psychological manipulation. He could escape from anything. He could control people's attention, make them believe in the impossible.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be interested in him, but did he actually work with them?
That's the thing. No one knows for sure. There's no official confirmation that he ever worked with the CIA, but the rumors are out there.
That's a wild thought. Just adds another layer of mystery to this whole culture thing. Makes you wonder what other secrets are still buried in those CIA archives, what other weird connections are waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, the world of espionage is full of secrets and deception. It's hard to tell what's real and what's an illusion. And MKUltra, with its magicians and mind control experiments, it really embodies all of that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Project MKUltra, what really stands out to you? What do you think will stick with you long after we're done talking about this?
For me, it's realizing that MKUltra wasn't just about mind control. It was about power. You know, this relentless pursuit of control over people, over information, even over reality itself. It's a reminder of how dangerous unchecked power can be, the allure of secrecy, and how easy it is to just, toss ethics aside when you think it's for national security.
That's a pretty scary thought. It really makes you realize we need to stay vigilant, question authority, and hold those in power accountable for what they do. The lessons of MKUltra can't just fade away.
Definitely. And we can't forget the victims, the people whose lives were destroyed by these experiments. Their stories are a powerful reminder of the human cost of these programs and how important it is to protect individual rights and freedoms.
So as we finish up this exploration of MKUltra, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I'd say this: the human mind is both incredibly powerful and incredibly vulnerable. It's capable of amazing things like creativity, compassion, innovation, but it can also be manipulated, exploited, controlled. It's up to each of us to protect our own minds. To think critically, be wary of anyone who tries to control our thoughts and actions, and to never stop questioning the world around us.
That's a powerful message, and a reminder that even in the darkest parts of history, there's always hope. The human spirit is strong, and our ability to think critically and resist, that's ultimately what will protect our freedom and independence.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think that about wraps up our deep dive into Project MKUltra.
This has been a fascinating and thought-provoking journey. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds sharp.